First, the revelations about Hunter, Joe, and the Biden family's funny money scheme have been coming thick and fast. And frankly, it is an absolute wonder, to me at least, that knowing what we now know, that Hunter is not in jail and that President Joe Biden is not right now drafting his resignation speech. Let me bring you up to speed on the latest developments. Just hours ago, Senator Chuck Grassley released heavily redacted FBI forms known as FD 1023s. These are what agents use to detail what confidential informants tell them in the course of investigations. Now, this form that Chuck Grassley released detailed the report of a CHS. That's FBI speak for a confidential human source. This source was considered highly credible by the FBI. He'd helped them with investigations over the course of a decade and had received over 6 figures in payments for his help. So to be clear, this report is not just from some random with an axe to grind who came in off the street. No, this source reported that Mykola Zlochevsky, the owner of Burisma, that's the corrupt Ukrainian oil and gas concern that had Hunter Biden on its books, well, they paid the Bidens millions of dollars to make corruption prosecutions go away. In the forms, it details how Zlochevsky said he put Hunter on the board to, quote, protect us through his dad. He went on to say Hunter will take care of these things through his dad. Zlochevsky also referred to Joe Biden as the big guy. We've heard that before. And said that all the money was sent through Hunter to Joe. This confidential human source detailed a conversation between Zlochevsky and the company's CFO, Vadim Piarsky, talking about the payments, saying that Hunter wasn't that smart, but that it would cost $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to pay the other. Now, when this source told Zlochevsky that they shouldn't get involved with paying the Bidens and that instead the company should hire, quote, some normal U.S. oil and gas advisors, Zlochevsky admitted that Hunter was, quote, stupid. And he said his dog was smarter than Hunter. But he said Burisma needed to keep Hunter on the board, quote, so that everything will be okay. Now, remember, at this time, Burisma was being investigated by the Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin. And Joe Biden later bragged about, in public, getting that prosecutor fired when he was vice president, supposedly because he was corrupt. And he did it by using the threat of withholding American aid to Ukraine.
I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Well, isn't that ironic? But that's not all. Something else pretty incredible has been taking place in Washington over the past 48 hours. Something we don't see anywhere enough of. Integrity. Specifically, integrity on the part of government officials who have, at huge personal and professional risk, put themselves on the front line to blow the whistle on corruption. Corruption at the FBI, corruption at the IRS, corruption at the Department of Justice, corruption in the Delaware prosecutor's office, and ultimately corruption in the Biden family. At issue is political interference into investigations into Hunter Biden and his business dealings. Business dealings that could potentially compromise the president himself. Now, one of these whistleblowers, Shapley, testified that the Justice Department did everything it could to stop the investigation from going too far. Have a listen to this.
The Justice Department allowed the president's political appointees to weigh in on whether to charge the president's son. After United States Attorney for D.C., Matthew Graves, appointed by President Biden, refused to bring charges in March 2022, I watched United States Attorney Weiss tell a room full of senior FBI and IRS senior leaders on October 7, 2022, that he was not the deciding person on whether charges were filed. That was my red line.
And here's Gary Shapley talking about the way investigations into WhatsApp messages between Hunter and his Chinese business partners were stonewalled.
With respect to the WhatsApp messages, it was something we clearly needed to follow up on, and that was really one of the major deviations from, in this case, is that investigators asked, and Special Agent Ziegler asked to follow, to take some investigative steps to review that, and it just simply wasn't supported by the prosecutors.
And here's a bit of the other whistleblower, Joseph Ziegler.
There was an environment when we were interviewing witnesses where you were afraid to ask questions that could lead to the presidential campaign. And this is after the campaign's over. So questions like that, it was restricted, and so things like that we were limited to talking about.
Now, Democrats, of course, have been running interference for the Bidens on this, though at the hearings, sometimes it became comical, like when Democrat Dan Goldman tried to prove that Joe Biden was not implicated by all of this, but in the process wound up showing that Joe Biden did, in fact, discuss foreign business dealings with Hunter.
You testified that he said that Hunter told his dad, according to Rob Walker, quote, "I may be trying to start a company or try to do something with these guys." Now, let me ask you something. That doesn't sound much like Joe Biden was involved in whatever Hunter Biden was doing with the CEFC if Hunter Biden is telling him that he's trying to do business with them, does it?
No, but it does show that he told his father he was trying to do business, and he was
okay. Well, that is true. Hunter Biden does try to do business. That's correct.
Well, that is true. Okay, we got to give him that. But this was, of course, the entire crux of what the laptop from hell was all about. Not the crack or the hookers, but 10% for the big guy and all that. Here's Ted Cruz breaking it down.
The whistleblower testimony today was damning. You have two different career IRS employees who go forward, and they testified before the House at great risk to themselves that Attorney General Merrick Garland has committed multiple felonies. If that testimony is truthful, it means Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's Attorney General, committed multiple felonies. He should be impeached, and the Department of Justice should appoint a special counsel to investigate prosecuting him for lying under oath and obstruction of justice.
Now, you and I know that in a sane world, this would be much bigger news than it is. The first family selling access to foreign interests, U.S. aid and foreign policy being distorted to help family clients, the president's Attorney General Merrick Garland protecting them, federal agents told to kibosh their investigations to protect the president's son. Come on. Look, I have said before on this program that America was heading into some real banana republic territory with all of this. And I don't know what you think, but as far as I'm concerned, the events of the past few days would only serve to confirm this. The fact that major media outlets like the New York Times have been acting as de facto state propaganda organs only further confirm this view. I mean, if you flipped all the way back to page 16 of your New York Times on Thursday, you would have found a report about it. This is a bit much given the breathless, hyperventilating, oh my God, get them a paper bag coverage the Times and most of the press gives to the slightest indiscretion by, say, Donald Trump. But for the New York Times and CNN, and so much of the American media, Trump winning represents an existential crisis. They can't allow any bad news about the Democrats to come out. if Donald Trump wins the White House, their whole worldview will fall apart. I mean, we saw what happened the first time around when Russia, for the first time literally since Lenin, suddenly became the left's public enemy number one. So desperate were they to find someone to blame for the fact that they ran a really dud candidate in Hillary Clinton who ran an even worse campaign. And now they've even been given an imprimatur, a blessing for their bias, as it were, by journalism academics. Jay Rosen, professor of journalism at NYU with more than 300,000 Twitter followers, summed it up a few days ago when he tweeted, quote, "Not the odds, but the stakes." That's my shorthand for the organizing principle we need most from journalists covering the 2024 election. Not who has what chances of winning, but the consequences for our democracy. So there you have it. Elite media in the U.S. now sees its job not to report the truth, but to shape outcomes. Meanwhile, next week, Hunter's business partner Devon Archer will be testifying before the House Oversight Committee. I guess we'll just have to see how they spin that and whether the great pillars of the media in the U.S. have one iota of the integrity of the likes of Ziegler and Shapley.